Assalamu alaikum.
guess
Welcome to Difficult Conversations, where we tackle taboo topics in a safe space through empowerment and education.
Hello, everybody. Actually, I wanted to ask you guys a few questions about something that happened to me yesterday. I took my daughter to the emergency room, and because she had like a high fever and hives and all of these things, and then I was thinking about a statement.
So what did they say in the ER?
Oh, they just said that like there's she was negative for COVID, negative for RSV, negative for influenza, but they said there's something going on with kids, like something going around, like some sort of virus, whatever, and she must have just caught it. So they just told us to like be paid how much money to be told to take ibuprofen and Tylenol.
I'm telling you. Overdose.
But it makes me feel like, okay, at least, she's okay. Because it was it was really, really freaky. And I remembered a statement a friend of mine actually told me, and way before, like, I think I was pregnant at the time with my first son, and she said, being a parent is the only mental illness everyone voluntarily signs up for, because like you will like lose sanity over like the smallest things. You will never gain the same level of certainty. Clarity. You are always worried, anxious, attachment, all of those things. Like you have to figure out how to have a healthy attachment with your kids, not to be either super attached to a point where they're, dependent on you all the time, and so on and so forth. And I thought it was like, that is a very dark way of looking at parenting, but it's true. Like that's the only kind of parenting that people, because like if my kid...
I wonder how are you feeling about the fact that that's what you had to deal with last night, and this morning coming to the show and like recording and that state of mind, and like how are you doing?
Well, I'm okay. I mean, it's great that we're talking about mental health today because I have a lot of material for it. Yeah. But I think the fact that I have a very dark perspective on things. Like my brain goes to worst case scenarios. So especially when my kids are sick, that's when I can't seem to have control over like my dark thoughts. So it's really, really toxic, and it's really debilitating sometimes, because like I told you guys, like, well, not told you guys, knew about this when my son had his febrile seizure at the Osfarin soccer game. While I was there and everything was happening, my brain was already processing his funeral. I was like, okay, this is happening. He's like, literally, we're just like, it's weird. Like I astral project in a way, and that happens. So, and I'm just like, okay, this is happening. He's okay. I have to figure it out. Like in this, and it's just so weird. And my brain starts, it's like a montage of spaces where,
do you kind of go blank, or do you kind of go into like,
I wish blank was great.
Or like say like problem?
No, I literally will have, like, you know how people say my life flashed before my eyes? Everyone that I love, when they are in trouble, their life flashes before my eyes. And I start seeing everything that I love about them, everything that I'm going to miss about them. All of these things start playing. And that is like in a spark of like
a second.
Wow. It's very, very like, and intense. So it's like I am, and it's crazy is that I'm also, while I'm saying this, it doesn't sound real, but I'm really, really good in crisis. Like I am the one that's like, if something happens, like I'm the one that's like jumping in, doing things, except I think the only time I ever froze was because of you. I don't know why, but
At the house.
At the house.
Oh, yeah. To this day, my trauma with that, I can't eat alone. I swallow so slowly. Yes.
Like,
Well,
I
yes.
literally, I just jump in and I'm very calculated. I'm like, move, do the...
Yeah, why
But
did you froze that day?
I don't know. I literally
Let's
was just
clarify
like,
what happened.
let's
so people would
clarify what
know.
happened.
So
Yeah.
I was holding her daughter, the
Yeah.
baby that she's talking about, and we were just kind of hanging out. And then I was really hungry, and so I took a bite of sambusa, and the sambusa, like the tail, the one of the part of it, it got stuck in my throat. And for the first time in my life, I was choking on food. Like it literally happened like a movie.
I think
Everything
were you
was.
talking at the same time?
No.
no, she was by herself.
I was
think.
me and the baby was
Me
sitting in
and
the
Sonia.
couch
Okay.
in the couch area, the living
Yeah.
room area.
Okay.
And then like I was wheezing.
Yeah.
I was like,
Yeah.
like kind of like that because there's no air.
Yeah.
It felt like I swear I was gonna die too. I literally went into it like somebody hold the baby.
Yeah.
As long as I don't drop the baby, I'm okay. Everything is okay, right? Like it's not about me, it's about the baby.
Wallahi, when she says this, I just want to say this. She literally, it was crazy. She was like, here, hold the baby. And I mean, she didn't say it, but she was just, and I didn't understand because like, I could see, I thought it was just like she, like miss breath. I don't know, whatever it's called. When when you breathe
it takes
in.
a second, yeah.
Yeah,
It takes
so
a second.
she handed me the baby and I took the baby and I was just going to go about my day. And she's like,
yeah. And then I came to you and then did because
And
I gave you the baby.
Wait,
and
did
then
I do? The thing is,
Yeah.
I don't remember the full details.
You
of it.
did
all
it, and
all
then
I remember was that you were
I went
stroking.
And
back
then her
home
husband
style,
came.
African style. My CPR training went out the window.
Oh my gosh.
I think my artiness takes over.
No,
in
but
those situations.
that feeling is still kind of like tightness in my gut.
Yeah.
And it's like a twist a little bit. But it's also like every time I chew right now at home. Somebody said this on TikTok. She said that, the scariest thing about living by yourself is that you can choke on food and nobody will find out. And then I'm like, okay, great.
You're like another thing unlocked, another fear.
Exactly, another fear.
Yeah.
And but for me, it's like I wouldn't mind. But talking about it, it's like we're talking about being frozen in a state of mind with kids. Like what Bonnie was saying, like she's a mother, and I wasn't. But the first thought is like, please take care of the baby.
Yeah.
Right, and that was
Yeah.
it.
And I felt, and of course the hero jumped into savior mode, and she was like, did that Hamlet maneuver?
Yeah, but the thing is, though, I think for me, like because of like my background in respiratory and stuff like that, like whenever I'm in public, I go through scenarios in my head. I'm like, okay, if I have to do CPR, what's the first thing I have to do? So then I go through that like the CPR training. It's like, step 1, step 2. So that's how like my brain works.
Yeah.
So
I'm
nice.
always like, okay, if this happens, if you're out and about, if you're on the plane, what would you do first?
Yeah,
You know?
that's one of the reasons actually I didn't want to go into medical field because like if you're a nurse or a RT or if you're a doctor and something happens,
you have to do something.
You have to do something legally,
Yeah.
otherwise you'll be held liable, right? If I'm not mistaken,
Something like
something
that.
like
I'm
that.
not exactly sure, but
yeah. So,
but as a human, like you'd want to do something
I
anyway.
know myself. Like it's like my brain is weird. I know I'm saying a bunch of oxymoronic stuff. But I do tend to respond to stuff. But then when when it's life-threatening things, I guess I don't do very as well as I thought.
So then as a parent, I want to ask you, like, okay, so now, your child has, he had that seizure and stuff like that. How do you think it will affect your child in the long run if, you have your type of parent who's like, oh my God, like, and stuff like that?
Well, that's the thing is that as parents, we have to always be aware of our
responses.
Not just responses, but our triggers, our emotional capabilities, and so on and so forth. So my thing is that I started going to therapy right while I was pregnant because I knew I'm going to parent from a space of fear. I'm going to parent from a space of trauma. I'm going to parent from a space of I guess my fear was that either my kids were going to turn out to be brats, and I've said this a long time because I'm like just giving them everything out of love, or I'm sheltering them so much that they're not going to be really exposed to like life and life's obstacles and hardships and, you know, all of those things. So the only way that I can fix that is before it gets there, I have to work on why, you know, the reasons to my response to my kids. So parents have to make sure they have to understand, why do I feel this anxiousness around my kids? Why do I feel the need to control their world or to control their, you know, the need for a rational level of safety, and figuring that out, making sure they have a really good coping mechanism for those things. And then obviously it will show up. Like I said, I have been in therapy for 5 years now, and I'm still, you know, it's still showing up for me, right? So what I do is that I just make sure I step back. Okay, I am experiencing these things. And hopefully, of course, I am having these conversations with my kids. Hey, it's not you. It's not that you are doing anything wrong or you are an unsafe child or whatever the case is. It's just that I have anxious attachment right now with you.
Yeah,
you know?
I think for me, I'm that parent that just lets them figure it out. Like, whatever the situation is, say my son falls, hits his head, my daughter, you know, is jumping off or doing all these things. I'm always the one that's like, you know what, you fell down. Then I wait until they come to me and ask me for help, you know. And so my kids know that if it really hurt, they'll be like, Mommy, you know, this really, really hurt.
Yeah.
You know, and I do, you know, offer comfort and stuff like that. So, but I think a good balance between, you know, running to them when they need help and also just letting them figure it out. It allows them to build that resilience and work through their problems.
Yeah.
I mean, are you guys, so my question is that what does healthy parenting looks like for you guys in that sense? Does your kids' mental health kind of in your radar when you are raising them, when you are interacting with them, when you are experiencing your own internal agitation, frustration? Do you think about like, how do I navigate? And if I do kind of like, let's say, for example, lash out or say something to my kid, do I go back, talk to them about saying, you know, I'm sorry, I wasn't supposed to do that, and I did it because of X, Y, and Z reason, but mommy or daddy will be mindful of it next time? Like, what would that looks like as far as like healthy parenting looks like when raising your kids that who is emotionally like aware of their feelings, that I'm not the causation of mommy's reaction towards me?
I think for me, you know, it takes, because, okay, for example, this morning, I was really, really frustrated because, you know, my kids were upstairs. They were trying to brush their teeth and all that stuff. And so they kept calling me and they're like, Mommy, come help me, come do this. But I was already downstairs, you know, preparing breakfast and stuff like that. So I kept like, and then finally I did go upstairs and I, you know, was like, and it showed on my face that I was really irritated by the whole situation. And my kids are kind of, I would say, more attached to me. And so they're like, no, I don't want, you know, I don't want daddy to do it. I want you to do it or whatever. And then my other daughter, she had madrasa this morning and she just did not want to go to the madrasa because I was like, you know, you have to go. Your younger sister doesn't, you know, she's not going to madrasa today. And so she threw a big fit and I just kind of like held her and I was like, you know what, you are going, you know, and gave her the eyes.
Yeah.
And she just sped off and went to her room. So then later on, you know, driving to madrasa, I was like, you know, the reason. So then I explained it to her why that, you know, because her sister, she's not learning anything right now. You know, and she's 4 and you're 7, 6, almost going to 7. So it's a requirement for her and not for you. So us talking about it, then finally she's like, you know what? I'm glad she's not here. I was like, why? She's like, you know, because every time we're in madrasa, she's always like, you know, pulling my hair or taking my hijab or whatever. And so she understood why she had to go and her younger sister didn't have to go. And she actually liked that in the end. So, you know, I would say just talking through it with your kids, you know, and it's not, we're not perfect. You know, we're human beings. We're dealing with our own issues. And at the same time, trying to raise kids that are resilient and able to withstand, you know, stressful situations.
Yeah. I guess let me ask you a few questions. In addition, so what would you say, like, in your everyday interaction with your kids, like when you're thinking of like, okay, I want to make sure that I am raising emotionally stable, emotionally intelligent, some, kids that are able to regulate their emotions well. What are the everyday activities that you do, everyday interactions that you do, like to make sure that they are able to navigate those spaces, even, in their highly emotional state?
So one thing, I've been reading this book that I keep talking about, How to Raise the Danish Way of Raising Parents, Kids or whatever. And one thing that I found fascinating in that book is how to use play as a way for kids to regulate their emotions. And so every day I've tried to make it a habit to turn off the TV and just let them play. Like, because when they play, they get into, especially when they have siblings, they get into fights, they get into disagreements and stuff like that. And it says how, like, when you play, you activate the same neurochemicals as stress.
Yeah.
And so when the kids are exposed to that, they're able to find ways to regulate it instead of avoid it.
Yeah.
And so over time, when they grow up, they're able to regulate their stress by themselves in times of stress. So that's helped us out a lot. And days that I am doing something and I want them, that I allow them to watch a little bit more TV, I can sense it in their behavior, and how they're kind of a little bit more irritable or not so, like, they don't play as well together on those days.
Yeah. It's funny sometimes, when you say, when you see what you preach.
Yeah.
It's so beautiful, because I see, so Sami loves hair. Like, she's turning 1 in like 3 days, and she loves hair. She doesn't have any hair right now, and so she grabs Nafi's hair and she like loves yanking on it. So she sees how I respond. Nafi sees how I respond when Sami pulls my hair, and she really has a grip, that girl. And she's like, so I'm like, Sami, please, this hurts, mommy. And I'm doing like demonstrative modeling, right? So I'm like, Sami, this hurts mommy's hair, please don't. And I'm just walking, like, undoing her fingers from my hair. So this morning, actually, Sami had grabbed Nafi's like ponytail, and she had like in her curls and like all hair and through all. So she's like, Sami, please don't do this. I'm your sister. Aww. This hurts me. This hurts my hair. And she's like pulling it like this. And then Yusuf came and he said, Sami, don't do this to our sister. And then it was like, oh my God, it's working. And it's, I don't think, I always say, like, obviously we don't make our little sister cry. We don't, Sami's just a baby. But I don't remember exactly having that conversation of like, talk to her like this or don't, but like, they just see me do whenever she does it to me. And I was like, that's how kids learn. It's just that demonstration of they do what you do, not necessarily always what you say to do.
Modeling does help. So I'm basically hearing that, having a different perspective of parenting, and then also emphasizing the openness and emotionally supporting your kids is the way to kind of create that environment for them. Also, like, if you're just like adult have emotional dysregulations moment, which is like agitation and frustration and irritability, and some days like you're in a rush and you have schedules and places to go, and your kid is giving you that morning, right? Yeah. Like, in that moment, what does it look like to support them and regulate them in that space?
That actually happens a lot in my house with Yusuf and my husband. And what we try to do, that happens a lot when their routine changes. Yusuf is very routine oriented, so he likes to do his, wake up, brush his teeth first, and then fix his bed, and then get his clothes done. And so if you say, hey, I'm gonna do your bed and you can go, because we're late. Like he has a hard time with that, right? So what we do is that, okay, explaining. I think walking them through, hey, this, and it's hard. Like, sometimes you do it with a very, like.
Do you explain in the midst of it, or do you kind of allow those?
Both. It depends.
Okay, does explaining work in those moments when they're dysregulated?
Well, for me, it depends on how dysregulated they are, right? Like, let's say, for example, he's like, Mommy, I want to do it. No. Okay, Yusuf and Jaylan had come up with, I don't know where he learned it, where this thing called blow the candle, which means he puts his finger in front of Yusuf and he's like, just, and that helps him like breathe. And so he's like, okay, blow the candle. Okay, now are you ready to listen to me? He's like, okay, yeah. And there are days he says yes, and there are days he says no. Yeah. If he says no, we have to go through the routine. Meaning like what we have to do, what needs to be done. And then when we have the time, we'll go and like talk about it. And one thing that's I really am enjoying right now is language, which is having the language to express. So like Yusuf will say something like, Mommy, you're not listening to me. I need this to happen. And I'm like, Yusuf, I am listening to you. Is this what you said? Yes. Okay. But I need you to understand we don't have time right now. Do you want to be late to school? If you're late to school, you'll miss on A, B, and C. So like that, the feeling of him saying, I'm not listening to you. So what's irritating him is that he feels like I'm not hearing him. I'm not taking that time. So I repeat what he said. So he has the understanding that I actually did hear you. I know what you said, but what needs to happen is this. And of course, he's 5. He's not going to always, be on it. We go past it. And then when we're in the car on our way, we will, basically just go through it.
What if you both are dysregulated?
Yeah, I think for me, that happens more than...
like, you both are it's up there.
I think for me, like, I push, right? Sometimes when I'm really dysregulated, I'll push back. And I'll be like, no, this is my way. And this is what we're going to do. Yeah. So I find myself doing that a lot more. And I think a good day for me is, like, when we don't have those outbursts. Okay. When like we're both able to this is what I want, and they get it done on their own. And for me, explaining it does not work at all, because especially my oldest, she has learned to push back a little bit too. And I don't know if it's like because I'm more focused on the younger one now, or like I feel like I'm more softer with my son and my daughter, because with Fatu, it's her way or the highway.
The middle child.
Yeah. Like if she wants something and she's quick to cry. Okay. She'll be like, even little things. She'll be like, Mommy, she took my pen. Then she'll start crying. Right. And so I've done this bad habit where I just want her to stop crying. And so I'll be like, Dia, can you please just give it to her? Let's just get over this situation. Give it to her.
Oh, so there's a rushness for you to kind of just
end
get
it.
rid of the discomfort that's happening with them.
Yeah, and with the language thing, lately, like, I'm always shuffling them around, and like we have activities, and like we're getting late for school and stuff like that. And so I started saying, you guys, we're late, let's go, So then my youngest, he'll be like, Mommy, are we late?
Aww.
So then, like, the other day I was thinking about it. I was like, you know what? Like, we're not late. Like, why am I using this language with these kids? And because now they're thinking like, Mommy's always rushing. Like, she's always rushing us out the door and stuff like that. So that's something I have to work on.
I think, we have to be a little bit more gracious to ourselves, because sometimes most of the time we are rushing, and that understanding of like, hey, we have to rush through this because we are rushing. I think we also have to give people, like our kids, the benefit of the doubt and the ability to be able to understand later on, right? Hey, in the bigger picture, Mommy's not always rushing,
I really am, though.
Well,
see, the thing is that, okay, finish your thought, because I have something to say.
Okay. Mommy's not always rushing, and we do spend a lot of quality time together. She does, like, she is calm and like hanging out with me most of the time when it's a free time, and when it's not morning time or evening time when we're either going somewhere or coming back from somewhere. One thing I was going to say was that we have this thing called the wall in our house when it comes to language. So I do this countdowns. So like I try to negotiate. I try to I'm like, hey, let's do this, do that, da 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 da, and then I say, Yusuf, the wall's gonna come down. So if it's the negotiation is not working, I'll say the wall's gonna come. Sometimes I don't even have to say the wall's gonna come down. I just start counting 5, 4, 3. I do it obviously very slowly, and they know that if the wall comes down by 0, there's no more negotiations, Mommy's way or the highway. So you have time until the wall comes down to be able to go something that's 50-50, 60-40, 30, but the wall comes down, no negotiation, we're going to do it the hard way. And I think that also helps. But then again, when it comes to the mommy guilt of like, oh, you know, I don't want them to feel some type of way, I always feel like I don't want them to think that I'm always super strict. Like I'm always just being like, oh, you know, because it sucks too when you have neighbors that seem to do whatever they want to do, right? Or like people in your life that seem to do whatever they want to do. So like they're like, oh, but so and so is. We have our neighbors that are like literally in front of us, and our sleep time is like 7:30 now, and they're out until 9:10, like just driving around. Now it's cold, but like they, you know, like they have motorcycles and they're like, you know, and cars or whatever. And and they're literally in front of Yusuf's window, and he sees them. He like he's in his bedroom and he opens the shutter like this, and he's like watching, and I have to be like, Yusuf, that is their house, their rules, you know. In that house, that's what they do. But in this house, and I have to explain that too, and it's just like it doesn't help, and I feel guilty, like. And now I know I'm going on a tangent, but Nafi she watched Cinderella, so whenever I am tough, she starts calling me the evil, not Stevie, the stepmother. Mommy's being a stepmother. It hurts so bad, and I hate it. Yeah. But she's like, mommy's being a stepmother, like it's like Cinderella.
Yeah.
Like,
so then, what does that mean when it comes to like? There are some things that we have been raised around ourselves and based on our parents' strategies and how they raised us. And I think in our previous episode, we talked about how in our culture, there's survival mechanism of like raising kids versus actually implementing this mental health strategies and making sure that we're raising emotionally regulated kids. What are some things that have you learned from your parents that you feel like you don't want to continue portraying that in your household?
I think for me is avoidance of emotion and just like the fact that you didn't know, like I feel like our parents tried to shield us in a lot of ways about like the hard times they were having, the emotions that they were going through, and their relationships, whether it was good or bad. So for me, I think I am trying to make it a point to talk to my kids about like when I am mad, when I am sad, and they can see it on my face that I'm upset. So authenticity is something that I think I'm working on, and making sure that like whatever conversation you have with them, it's authentic. And like, okay, me and Baba are, because like my daughter, when me and her dad were like, we'll talk back, you know, we're like talking back to each other, and she'll come in between and she'll be like, stop arguing, you know? And so, you know, it's like, it's not always going to be rainbows, you know? There will be times where you disagree with your husband, or, you know, and you want them to see that in a holistic way.
Yeah.
So does that mean that you didn't get to see it with your parents and now you're trying to like avoid that for your own kids?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because I feel like I grew up avoiding emotion, you know, and I'm very uncomfortable with a lot of emotion. And now that I have kids, even when they, like, I said this a lot of time, but my middle one, she's full of all the emotions. And I think my older one too, she's starting to express herself in a lot of different ways. And so I always have to stop myself and say, you know, let them express it instead of saying, Fatu, stop crying. Or like, Fatu, you know, like why did you do that? You know what I mean? So just letting them go through all of that, and then talking to them about it.
Yeah.
It's easier said than done, honestly.
Definitely. Yeah. I grew up in a house that was a little bit different than yours in the sense that my parents fought in front of me. They made up in front of me. Like I saw that very much. So it was very much okay for me that, like, even in my friendships, like, I was so okay with fighting. Like, we can argue, we can fight. I knew that was in the end. Like, as long as, of course, like, I loved the way they fought. Like, they argued, but it was in insults. It was in, like, you know, anything. It was like everybody had, like, they were passionate about whatever they were talking about. But no, it wasn't. I never, like, heard any insults, any, you know, like, any degrading or whatever. And And I also didn't see, and I don't know if this helps, but I didn't see, like, you know how, like, in this country they say, like, the husband, like, the wife is always right, and the husband, like, just says okay and okay, whatever, like, that I didn't see. Like, my dad fought. Like, he's a very shy dude. He didn't, like, people wouldn't believe, like, he was a warrior at home, but, like, he literally was just like, this is what I believe, this is what it is, and then she'd be like, this is what I believe, this is because of A and B and C and D and, you know, point 1, point 2, point 3, and, like, and whoever had the most, I guess, right point won. Not because she's his wife and he wants to cater to her, not because not because he's the husband, but whoever was the most right one. So that let me have, like, that. Even in our house now, like, when I see on social media, sometimes I always tell Jaylan, I'm like, dude, can you just let me be right? Like, the wife is always right. Like,
yeah.
But it's not like that in our house either. One thing I don't want to do that my parents did, and actually me and Tabi were talking about this yesterday in the parking lot, is the idea of putting emphasis on, like, on certain things too much to a point that your kids feel like their worth comes from that. So in my house, it was a lot about education, and, like, my mom, whenever I brought, like, good grades home, it was like she was super ecstatic. Like, my family was super ecstatic, all of them, like, from my grandfather, and that was the same thing. I've heard stories about my grandpa doing the same thing to my mom. Like, you know, they had, like, 9 kids, and the most favored one that week was the kid that had the best grade. You know what I mean? Like, they would get the presents and whatever. So that's kind of how my mom raised me. Is she emphasized grades, emphasized the importance of academia, or academic excellence. So I still struggle with the fact that, like, if I'm not in school, like, I don't really have a really good gauge of progress. Like, and
your sense of worth related to academic
success. Yeah. So it's not necessarily monetary success, which is funny, but academic success. So I'm always in school. I'm always, like, in, you know, and also I'm very much in competition with myself. So, like, if I feel like, which also feeds to that point of, like, I'm always not feeling like I'm reaching my, you know, doing my best or whatever. So
there's not, like, an actual measurement for that.
Yeah.
Because you're constantly climbing it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So that I don't want to do, and I kind of practice that. Even now, my son is very studious in the sense that he is always doing homework. His teacher has to hide her homework sheets. I always keep saying this, like, when she has to hide her homework sheets that she prints out for the next day, or her classroom sheets, whatever, because he's like, can I please take this home and do homework? Or he starts doing it while they're supposed to be playing. He's very into that, and I'm like, oh, that's great. But then I always make sure to give the same amount of emphasis to when he's doing chores, or when he's, like, just being kind to his, you know, like, so he knows you have to, like, your worth is not just because of your excellence or your whatever. It's spread out. I guess I want to ask us a little bit more about, like,
I have something to say about that. So what you were sharing, examples of, like, your generation, like how your mom's father did similar academic performance was, like, part of the family, and it passed into your aunt and uncles, and, like, everybody's academic performance, like, the highlight of what that recognition is. Sometimes you don't have to do those things to your kids. It's automatically within your blood. And I know this one, you guys hate this, like, when I say this.
The generational.
Yes. Wallahi, you hate this, but the fact is the fact. You work really hard to try to create a better, safe environment for your kids, and somehow one of your kids become very anxious, like, academically worries and always apprehension about everything. It's not you doing those things. It's been happening to your mother, and it's happening to your grandfather was doing that. It's because it's already in the blood, and you're like, but I didn't do those things to my kids.
Yeah.
I worked really hard to make sure that I create safe space and make sure that they're safe. I did that. And then you find out that like one of your kids has significant anxiety. And one of the things that I always want to say to parents is that don't go into blaming you are the causation for these experiences. And like, so that is something that you have to be aware of. I want to give a little bit of example when it comes to generational stuff. There was a client who came and talked about how that she said that I always receive colds after I wash my hair. And I know she
like
get
phone calls?
Cold, like fevers and cold.
I was like, ghosts.
No. Like, she's like, everybody in my household is fine, right? And I was like, she's like, my mom is fine, and nobody talked about it. And then she later found out that her great-grandmother, when she washed her hair, she always gets similar cold, like getting fever. Especially.
Does she go outside after she washes her hair?
No, it's like it's the fever. I don't know. Like, you can't ask client of those things, right? So what I'm my point is that generationally things happen, and you know your mother doesn't have it, you know your sister doesn't have it.
Yeah.
You try to investigate in every aspect of like, where is this coming from? Why is this happening like this? It's not you.
Yeah, I think I think with the praise, what helps is like correct me if I'm wrong with this in your
my professional
opinion.
experience. I don't know. We'll see.
I think what helps is if you praise the process and not necessarily like the result, you know.
Yeah.
And I think with my kids, I'm always like when Dia does homework and stuff, and she gets something wrong, we go like, okay, yeah, you did this part right, and you know, kind of spelling out that it's this thing that you're doing that's right, not necessarily attaching it to them as a person,
them, like calling them smart and this and that. I wouldn't call kids smart because smartness would eventually attach to again with their sense of self-worth. It's kind of saying, wow, look at you, you work really hard and you figure that out on your own. That process must be really difficult. Look at you, what you could do, right? It's kind of like giving them the strength, like, oh, if I can do those difficult things, I can do anything else. Does that make sense?
Not just limited to this one thing.
Exactly. So the process is the best aspect to encourage them the validation that they deserve. And the validation, like, I am so proud of you, validation is also like, the ownership goes back to the person who's proud, not that they are proud of themselves.
So like taking ownership of your own emotion.
Yes.
You know?
So when the kid says, my mom is proud of me, so what else can I do to get that proud? Right? What else can I do? So then the external validation increases more. Right? How can I get more validation that feels safe for me? So if you said, are you proud of yourself for doing this? And then if the kid says, yes, I am. So then that means that it's internal mapping, internal regulations.
Oh, that whole external, internal locus of control aspect of it.
Exactly.
Okay.
So like, how do we manage that is by trying to, like you said, process is what we want acknowledged. How the difficulty, how they overcame those things. Not the fact that they are those specific quality to describe them, if that makes sense.
Not a pushback, but I guess an addition, or maybe a pushback, just because I kind of have been reading a lot of books, like Abshar was saying about, and one of the things that I was learning and I kind of practice in my house is the spreading of praise, like across all fields. But I think when it comes to language, that's what I wanted, maybe that pushback part comes in, is that, you know how you guys said, don't say you're smart. And I think you don't want like being smart or being beautiful or being, you know, mommy's proud of you and daddy's proud of you. We're always proud of you. You don't want that to come from an outside source first. So not putting an extra emphasis on or an extra importance on the fact that they're smart and spreading that everywhere, like, you know, like your attention or your praise not being on that word alone takes the pressure off of them only identifying with that word as their self-worth. But hearing that word come from you, someone that they trust, and you acknowledging the fact that they are smart actually helps them in the long run. And because they feel like they next time someone says, you know, and that goes a lot with beauty when it comes to girls too, is that when next time someone says, even at work or at school, someone tells them, oh, wow, you're smart, they're not going to say, oh, you think so? It's more of, I know.
Yeah.
And they feel it.
But that's the thing, right? So like if the children receive the level of safety and as a validation already at home, they don't need to seek out outside.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So it's like what the conversation related to overpraising, something that you also talk about, is that the ownership of what their validation, it should come from themselves. Does that make sense internally? Even though the first messaging should be coming from the home, they should recognize those things eventually on their own.
Yeah. And I think like when it comes to beauty, so my middle daughter has like longer hair, right? Longer, and it's a little softer than my oldest. And so a lot of the times my oldest will be like, Fatu's hair is so much prettier, and so in my middle one, she really doesn't care. She's not, she I don't think she's not even aware. She's not even aware of that. And so what I've started to do is to say, compliment Dia on her hair. Be like, wow, I wish my hair was like yours. And, and kind of get her into, because she's here, right? She doesn't believe that her hair is beautiful. And she's kind of, and I can see it too when I'm washing their hair and stuff, she's kind of looking at her sisters and like, oh, wow, and so I think building that first step of saying your hair is beautiful too is really, really important. Because because now she'll start to do her hair and, she's into that whole like makeup and, and stuff like that.
Yeah. And also like, in our household, when like before they go to sleep, they have this mantra that they go around: I am beautiful, I am kind, I am nice, I am worthy, I am smart. And that's why I always say, and they and then mommy's so proud of me, and I am proud of me, and daddy's so proud of me, and I am loved. And like literally that's like they say that, and then they make their dua, and then they go to sleep. So like instead of like reading books,
that is beautiful.
So we do that like literally every day. So the reason why I try to implement that a lot is because you say it enough, you believe it, and your thoughts create your your words create your thoughts, your thoughts create your emotions, and so on and so forth. So I just want to build that of like, yes, being smart is not the only factor, the only identifying factor, the only thing that's worthy. But your beauty is not the only thing that's worthy. And the thing is too, you speak it into existence.
Yeah, absolutely.
I see this a lot in my household where I when they do something unkind or like to each other, they're being, and I say, wow, you know what I love about my kids? They're just so kind to each other. And they love each other so much.
You're building character.
And you see it like
they start playing together better.
Together better versus me being like, which I do that too sometimes when it gets a little irritating, and that time they are more scared of like mommy coming in to disrupt or to fix versus when I'm like doing this praise of like, oh, you're so kind to each other. Right. That makes me so happy for you. Then they are like, oh, okay, let's play into this thing that mommy has spoken into. How would you guys say the question that I was going to ask was building the emotional safety in the household when they're, I'm sure I know you touched a little bit about that, but like when they are not, how comfortable, I still don't know how to do this, and Tabe, maybe this goes to you then more than I'm sure, but like how are we able to have them express their their discomfort, dislike, this, whatever, without being disrespectful, right? Like creating that emotional safe space to be authentically them, and so that later on they don't feel this hesitation and people pleasing thing to in their workplace, in their school, whatever. What are some practices I guess parents can implement in their household?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, I want to ask you guys, what is the definition of disrespect for you as a parent, right? What does that look like for you as a parent? And once you figure that out, what is the discomfort for you as a parent, right? What makes you feel uncomfortable? And what are those things that you're like, oh, I don't even know much about this? And I think a lot of times parents project their own fear to their kids in many aspects of it. It's like, let's say, for example, if your children, 6, 7 years old, brought up sex and talk about sex, it's something that they just heard from their friend, right? Mommy, what this means. As you, what were you doing that state?
I would freak out.
Another one. Here's another one. Here's another one.
Because she's 6.
What if you find out your 7-year-old boy or girl seen pornography and you catch that?
I'm moving countries.
Right?
I think it depends, like, in what context. Was it like, did they type it in themselves, or like, what was somebody in the house watching that? You know what I mean?
That you don't
Or
know,
the
but like, let's say
exposure.
the exposure, you saw something that they're watching. They didn't know that you know how some internet is wild place, right? They can. I'm giving you guys a very
And actually,
extreme
yeah,
example.
that's true, because like even YouTube, you know, like
does it.
Yeah, like not pornography, but like
there's nudity in some aspect of things that kids can come across and like, whoa, right?
And, like, I think so. Last week, my kids and I we had to talk about it and everything, but they were watching these dolls, and the dolls, like, it was like these cartoons or whatever, and it's like, you know how like they have there's a hand or something, I don't know, they're doing something, but the dolls were pregnant and they were giving birth or whatever, like pregnant dolls, and I just froze. I was like, what are they watching?
That right there,
you know, and so. And I think
that meaning
I
of
banned YouTube for like a week. Look, because
done here.
We're done.
Let's move. We're done. Let's pack. You know?
That's funny. I not YouTube related stuff, but my son went to school, and then the next day, like not even the next day, that when we picked him up, he said, "What?" And he dropped the F. And Jaylan said he pulled the car over. Because, one, we know, like, when he went to school, he didn't know that word. He still, like, goes at me because I say what the heck a lot. And he's like, Mommy, don't say what the heck. That's a bad, because we have, so first we had to figure out where that language came from. And second, we had to explain, like, hey, you know, that's not good language. You know, if you feel frustrated or whatever, you should use different language. And Jaylan said he literally pulled the car over, because one thing I genuinely believe in is like not postponing things. I catch it, address it, and also your response to it. I feel like emotional attachment when it comes to actions, like, and I've talked about this before, like the kids can pick up on your
reaction.
Whoa, this is serious. Okay, my dad pulled the car over and he turned around and he's talking to me about this. That's serious. So he's like, where did you hear it? And he's like, my friend blah 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 at school said it in the playground. He's like, okay. So I want to tell you, this, you know, this is not a really good phrase. And alhamdulillah, we haven't gotten to that part, that crazy, you know, like YouTube part yet. But, you know, we don't say that, I think if, let's say I see my kids going through that, I don't know if I told you guys that actually happened to me, like when I was in high school. Not I was watching porn, but my computer got a virus because I was watching a movie on, you know, those
1, 2, 3 movies.
Is it what it is called? Like the rip off like movies, the bootleg movies.
Yeah.
So the virus came in through there, and I literally was watching I don't even remember, a very innocent PG movie. Okay, I think it was Princess Protection Program, Selena Gomez and Demi Lovato.
I like that movie.
And I literally was watching that.
Why would you like that movie? It was like on everywhere.
No, it wasn't, because I didn't have any, like, I was only allowed to watch TV like 2 days on.
Oh, this wasn't at this back home.
No, here.
It was here. Okay.
This was in high school.
Anyway,
I was only allowed to watch on Thursdays for Vampire Diaries. That hour was saved, so I couldn't watch anything on TV yet. Okay. So anyway, long story short, I was watching that, and then all of the sudden, and this thing comes up, and Isumo's walking up the stairs behind me. And then imagine I'm watching this movie on my computer with the normal speed of, I mean, not speed, sound of like loud, because I have nothing to be hiding, you know? And then all of a sudden this lady's like, and she's all leg up. And that's the first private part of someone else that I've ever seen in my life. And my uncle, he just looked at me and he just ran to his back. See, that's what I'm saying. It's all about. It's all about reaction. Yeah. We
either fight or flight.
Oh my God. Yeah.
So we either fight or flight and would freeze.
I literally slammed the computer and I said, "Hey, Smo, I swear it wasn't me."
Oh my God. I will say though, like, when it comes to, creating safety for your kids, you do have to, like, as uncomfortable as it is, you do have to talk about this in your house before they experience it out there. Because imagine, like, I think my worst fear would be if my child went through something, somebody did something to them and they did not have the language and they did not have the comfortability or the safety to come to me and say, Mama, this happened to me.
Yeah. And I think
go ahead.
Just want to add to that. The way we are able to do this and to build that is by making sure there's an open line of communication through the small things, right? And I think we've spoken about this before. Like, I learned this actually from my grandmother, and she would tell my aunts that if anything happens, just come to my house. It's fine. Come home. Anyone does anything, come home. The school is, you're late to school and the school doors go back home. Once you're late to school, you can't go in. They close the door. Normally what other kids used to do is that they would just walk around, do other things. She's like, just come home. You won't get in trouble. If you did something and you need help, just come home. I won't punish you. Just tell me what's going on. I'm there. And that aspect of it, like, even now, opening that line of communication and being like, just be straightforward. We'll have a conversation. I'll be able to help you out versus, just being like harping on everything. Because if you react on if your kid took a cookie from the cookie jar and you make a big deal out of it, next time he's not going to take the cookie from the cookie jar. He's just going to figure out a way to do it without you knowing.
You.
So to answer you guys the question that you asked, it's about your reactions. It's about how you are regulated enough with the discomfort that arises. It's about your tone of voice when your child's doing a specific act or things that you actually don't agree with. And this is a point of the conversation. So the way to create emotional safety is just more like, if I'm being triggered, how can I regulate myself before I engage in this conversation with my child, right? Do I react and be frustrated and be irritated and then respond based on that? And another thing that comes with that is that in our culture is what we do is that how pressure and hushing secrecy and then shame kind of develop, right? Things happens and we don't address it. We either embarrass the person, humiliate them, right? And then tell them, why did you do that, this, and they start going into attacking. Like, for example, what you were sharing earlier, if your uncle saw you and just went at you, right? At that moment and kind of like braided you really aggressively.
What did you do?
Like, right?
If he had said that.
Like, that's no, but if he did that, right?
I'd just cry.
Exactly. She will go into the shame of the whole thing that one, I didn't do it. Secondly, I'm not watching it. And third, this is really
you don't
bad.
Trust me, because it goes back to like, what kind of person do you think I am?
Exactly.
You don't trust me. You must have a preconceived notion of who I am. And
instead
all
of him
things.
saying like, okay, I saw that. I'm going to pretend like I didn't see it right now, but then I'm going to have a conversation with her about it. So then it's like, if you came in the room saying, I wasn't watching it and this is what happened and clarified, then, okay. Well, thank you for explaining that. I didn't assume anything bad about you, right? If that was done, Bonnie would never have any negative thought about the whole experience.
And I think the whole shaming and like throwing things under the rug in our culture is huge, because so many things happen and we almost blame the victim.
Yes. In many aspects of it, we do.
Yeah. And I know that, in this episode, we don't really have time to go into all of that.
Yeah.
But should we wrap it up a little bit?
I think we still have a couple more things that we want to talk about, like ways that criticism and shame and performing affects
boundaries,
us.
I think
You know what I mean?
would be a good one.
Even that a little bit.
Boundaries,
Yes. And how that affects us. Like when we talked about earlier, like part of the emotional safety again is that how do we talk about not shaming, embarrassing our children, right? What does shaming and embarrassing our children impact them as an adult, right? As a teenager, the way they interact in their own worlds and how that affects them with interpersonal relationships. In that sense, I don't think we talk about it enough when you guys are already, like now, you two or anyone who's listening to this episode, if you are already implementing some sort of safety right now, right? Meaning that things are a lot more smoother for them, right? Versus somebody who is not even aware of all these possibilities and how to create a safe space for their children. And then all of a sudden they're like just parenting out of fear, out of authority, and out of like not have the patience to navigate a discomfort and dysregulation that occurs.
And I would say that kids, they are really smart when it comes to these things. I remember an incident where I was talking to my siblings, and my daughter was there, and I didn't realize that she was there in the room with us. And so I was telling them, oh, the past weekend, Dia did A, B, and C, and and I was just talking about, and it wasn't something bad, but it was uncomfortable for my daughter. So then later on, when we went home, she told me, you know what, Mommy, I don't like how you told Auntie what happened. That was very embarrassing. And so it was really uncomfortable for me, but I had to sit with that emotion and to, realize. I told her, you know what, I'm so sorry that I did that. Next time I won't share, if you don't want me to share something. Yeah. So building that comfort and safety for them, I think is a good way to start.
Yeah. Yeah. I think also the idea of making sure that there's boundaries and rails and safety mechanisms they build for themselves as much as we build for them, right? And also we have to give them agency, right?
Yeah.
One thing I have been really good at, and I think we kind of have been talking about this again, and I try to take whatever we talk about and implement it in my life, is that being able to say, hey, do you want to hug so-and-so? Do you want to give so-and-so a hug? Do you want to say hi to so-and-so? Hey, do you want to do this? Hey, can I come in your room? I know, can I come in your room? Hey, can Sami, not for Nafi, can Sami borrow this? Or can Yusuf borrow this? Or can Nafi? So being able to give them the opportunity to say no. Right? And being comfortable to say no. And no, it's not necessarily always disrespectful. That's giving them agency, giving them, of course, they know that they can't say, I'm going to put my hand in the fire and I'm going to let them. No, that's not going to happen, but just giving them that little, like with every age, just giving them a little bit more agency so that they know, hey, my no is enough. I don't have to explain my no. Yeah. So next time someone challenges their no, they feel comfortable to be able to stand on that and say no. Yeah. Being able to let them know, hey, you don't have to prove things to people. Making sure that, again, your boundary and letting them know why you have boundaries like this, right? Religious boundaries, cultural boundaries. We don't do this because of this. We don't do this because Allah says this, because we're Muslim, because we're Oromo, because we're this. And it's bigger than us, right? And being able to put enough context into those boundaries, into their barrier, into barriers that from other people, and also like letting them know that, hey, you cannot and should not let other people speak to you in a certain way. If you don't even like the way I speak to you, you can have a conversation with me about that, and I have to be okay with, like you said, okay with whatever you tell me, and process it and say, hey, I'm so sorry, and so on and so forth.
And I think the other thing is, as the last point, is just to be hyper vigilant about people around your kids, regardless of how close you are to them, regardless of what relationship they have, to be aware, because sometimes, it is people closest to you that have access to your kids that do things to them,
that do sadly this to them. Like the biggest, the large majority of essays, sadly, and happen because through people that are known to our children, and also that have that damage their self-worth, that could damage their their self-esteem, confidence. Because if you can do as much as you can, but then every time they encounter this person, if they are calling them out of their name, if they're calling them such and such, and you don't stand up for them, then that I know a lot of people that get color shamed, right? Like colorism, gurrati, or someone is big,
texture too.
All of that, hair texture.
You just gave an example about hair texture between your two daughters.
I know. But imagine someone saying that, like saying, "Oh wow, your hair is whatever your hair is, or if she would be so beautiful if she wasn't so dark.
No, I'm
she's so
super
big.
like my antennas are all the way up.
I'm always not even just about to my kids. I don't want people to say that about themselves around my kids or to another person around my kids. I'm really, really like cutthroat about that.
So basically, thank you so much, you guys. And I think a lot of things that we talked about today is basically trying to have an open communication in our household within our kids and making sure that we create a safe space for them. In many aspects of it, like the part of the resources, I would encourage our audience to like read books, and there is other resources out there how to create a safe space for one another in our house, in our home, and also understanding boundaries and limitation that kids needs, and how do we clarify that, and being able to model some aspect of boundaries, and the boundaries itself does not seem to be like a form of disrespect to you. So kind of address that for yourself. And if you are triggered based on the comments that you do hear in this episode as well, please kind of take the time to take care of yourself. I encourage anyone out there, please take care of understanding the triggers that we are raised in our family members, and try to unlearn some of the things so that we can kind of create a better, safe, understanding, and compassion state for one another. So we love our conversation today, and
we'll talk about
benefits.
more. Definitely, like as the whole essay thing, we definitely have to get into, and child grooming, and all of that. So we will talk about it.
A lot of stuff for first,
especially with all the stuff going on now.
Yes, absolutely. So prioritize your self-care, prioritize yourself, prioritize your kids, prioritize your community. And thank you for listening. This is Difficult Conversation.
See ya. Assalamu alaikum.
Join the conversation in the comments section or on our Instagram page to share with us what you think. We do not have all the answers, and our biggest goal is to kick off and get the conversation going. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept our efforts and use us as catalysts for change.
MBC. No relation to NBC.